Hey everyone, Joe Waxman here, and in this video, I'm going to look at the chart of Abraham Lincoln, the famed president who freed the slaves and won the Civil War for the Union. Guys, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you have not already. Okay. Share my screen. Okay, this took a while to prepare for, just because I was trying to read through everything and get a perspective. Let's say there's a lot of, I've heard different stories about Lincoln and the reasons for the Civil War and whatnot. Some people argue that it wasn't about slavery, it was about states' rights, and that might have been true to some extent, and that Lincoln was not really for freeing the slaves. However, if what's it, and I know Wikipedia is biased, and I know that, but unless they're outright lying about a lot of the things and even quotes from him, it seems like he was against slavery from the beginning, and he was raised to be that way. So that's what makes sense to me. I'm not an expert on this. I'm not a historian, but it seems like he was fervently against slavery. However, his main role as president, when he was acting as president, was to preserve the Union. And he even states he would have done so if it meant compromising and letting the southern states remain slaves. But let's start from the beginning. Retain slaves, I should say. Keep slavery. All right. Abraham Lincoln, sometimes known as the Great Emancipator or Honest Abe. He was a lawyer, statesman, and the 16th president of the United States until his assassination in 1865. He was roughly 54, I guess. So, yeah, after his birthday. Okay. Sorry, no, 56. He led the nation through the American Civil War and succeeded in preserving the Union, abolishing slavery, bolstering the federal government, and modernizing the U.S. economy. Objections to what he did were that the southern states were for more autonomy and states' rights, and they could mint their own money and all that. And while I agree with a lot of that, there's certain things that are quite heinous and that we wouldn't want to have states' rights. Like slavery is one example. I would find that detestable, right? Like or child sacrifice, or satanic stuff like abuse, or like murder, or like chopping people's hands off for stealing, or like throwing all the heinous inhumanitarian acts. I would expect the national government to take up use its power to enforce the humanitarian side of things. So I'm for that, but I'm also for states' rights where it's not abusing humanitarian values and morals and ethics. So that's just my basic view about these things. So I'm appreciative of the way the Civil War turned out. Not appreciative of the war itself, but the emancipation of slaves. Obviously, who's not? Well, some people aren't. Some people aren't. Some people make a case for slavery, and I can't agree with that. But anyway, he also expanded the powers of the government, which, I mean, I don't know the details, so I can't really comment. Mostly I'm for small government. So, okay. Case. He was born in poverty in Kentucky, raised on the frontier in Indiana, self-educated, became a lawyer, Whig Party leader. That was the predecessor political party of the Republican Party. The Republican Party formed out of the Whig Party in response to slavery. The Republican Party was born out of wanting to abolish slavery. It was a conservative party that wanted to abolish slavery. That was the Republican Party. Okay. Interestingly, I know that the modern everything's twisted in modern politics. Everything's lies and deceit, and but basically, just while we're here, republic stands for rule by law. So we are a republic, and what the superiority of a republic over a democracy is that a republic will protect the smallest minority, which means the individual, but all minorities, because it's ruled by law for every single one. Democracy by its nature is mob rule. It's not a very high ideology. And even like if you look back at ancient philosophers, they always say that because the masses are dumb. Always, the masses are always the dumbest people. So whenever you have mob rule, you have the dumbest ruling over the fewer constituents, which are obviously going to have potentially a more evolved view. So yeah, masses rule is always the dumbest. That's why, but I mean, obviously we have to have voting, which is where democracy comes in, but on the basis of a constitution of a republic, right? Republic is tied to the constitution. That's why Republican, constitution, they are aligned, right? Rule by law protects the minorities. So Republican is actually for all minorities. Democracy is not by nature, because democracy means majority rule opposed to minority. Democracy means opposed to minorities. So the Democrat Party, by nature, is opposed to minorities. That's just facts and logic. So just putting that out there. I mean, you can't argue with that. Democracy means mob rule, the majority, opposed to the minority. That's straight, as factual and logical as you can get. So, this idea that the Republicans are racist I mean, that's just nonsense. I mean, it might be true, in detail, but not in ideological perspective. Okay, so I had to throw that in there. I'm gonna insert my take on all these things because that's what I'm allowed to do. All right, he was a lawyer, and then he was president. First he was a legislator, and then a congressman. And he was, by the way, like, he was always opposed to slavery, like I said. And he was raised that way because of the church that his father was a part of, was opposed to slavery. Okay, then he was elected to president, and the war started, and then he won the war, and he made many great speeches, and then he was assassinated. So that's that. No, just kidding. All right, so I'm just gonna have to really like skip through this all because it's way too long to really okay, one of the interesting things is, yeah, he was born into poverty, and he did not like physical work, but he loved to read, so he was very studious mentally. However, he was not physically weak. He was tall. He's 6'4" and strong, and he was a wrestling champion in his county. So he was, physically imposing, but he was much more of an intellectual than a physical person. Although, I mean, I guess he was both, because he was a wrestler. They were part of the separate Baptist church, which forbade alcohol, dancing, and slavery. I thought that was hilarious. Like, these three: alcohol, dancing, and slavery. Like, watch out for alcohol, dancing, and slavery. Like, don't don't express any happiness through dancing, and as well slavery. Like, don't hold any slaves. I mean, it's just funny. Like, that's the three things they forbade: alcohol, dancing, and slavery. I mean, I'm sure there's much more to it than that, but whatever. Dancing. I mean, alcohol, okay, I can see why a church might want people not to drink, but dancing, don't celebrate, don't be happy, don't express your happiness. Okay. Mother died young of milk sickness, which is apparently when the cow eats this plant, which is, what's it called? Snake root, white snake root plant. It has a chemical that's passed on to the meat and the milk, that kills people. It's crazy. I never heard of that, but she died when he was 9 years old. So that's not great. And there were many other deaths, and that was typical for families back then. He did not enjoy physical labor, but loved to read. Self-educated. He read lots of books. Here's some book, the Bible, autobiography of Ben Franklin, all of these. Wrestling champion at the age of 21. Strength and audacity after winning wrestle match from the leader of a ruffian gang. They moved around a lot. Homesteading. Father was into land and all sorts of stuff, but he was uneducated. And Lincoln was into education. He married. He had kids. Only one survived. The rest died. Yeah, Robert Todd Lincoln is the only surviving heir of President Lincoln. Lincoln suffered from melancholy, which is thought to be clinical depression, because of his kids. He loved his kids, but 3 of them died, and that was very sad for him. I mean, it's very sad for any parent to lose their children. It's incredibly devastating, right? I'm sure everyone knows that. He was in the militia and got into politics young, but he didn't win his first race. He became legislator in the Whig Party. That was the predecessor to the Republican Party. He was in the U.S. House of Representatives. He was opposed to slavery, but also opposed to abolition, which means the law, the rule, the by law to abolish slavery. It's funny, I guess that because of the, I don't know. At one point, it said he was in favor of moving the freed slaves to Liberia, which is a nation in Africa, which seems kind of crazy and ridiculous today, but eventually, it happened the way it happened. Trying to find relevant material here. He was a lawyer, and he was a prominent lawyer, and he's very intelligent. He's self-educated there as well. Republican leader. Remember, the Republican Party came out of the desire to abolish slavery. And he was, like I said, he was against slavery. He thought all men should be free. So he bore no racism. He was not as far as I can tell, as far as like everything they're saying here, even Frederick Douglass, there's a quote from him that said he treated him like, anyone else, like a man. The Republican Party was formed as a Northern party dedicated to anti-slavery, going from anti-slavery wing of the Whig Party and combining free soil liberty and anti-slavery Democratic Party members. So the Republican Party was born for anti-slavery, to remove slaves. That's the whole purpose. And it was based on the Republic, which means rule by law, which is the Constitution. Republicans were born from the Constitution. He was very what's the word, diplomatic. He wanted to appease both sides, and which is why he opposed abolition at first, because he did not want to alienate the opposing party members and the states and whatnot. He didn't want to divide. He wanted to keep the unity of the country. So initially his stance was that he was not going to propose abolition, but he did not want slavery to expand. So that was his line in the sand, was that the new states that were forming were going to be free states, meaning that they were not going to have slaves. And his idea was that this was before the Civil War, that the free states would outnumber the slave states, and that would eventually be the tipping point for the future, that would the larger contingent of free states would influence and have gradually create abolition, or the slavery would lose favor over time. So politics, Senate, all that, speeches. And then he becomes president. And the war starts. Succession. So a bunch of states succeed after he becomes president. And forgive me if my details are very shoddy in this. Like, I'm not a historian. I just tried to read through this as quickly as I could. Lincoln's election in response to succession implemented plans to leave the Union before he took office in March 1861. So before he took office, they wanted to succeed. South Carolina took the lead by adopting an order of succession. Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas followed. 6 of these states declared themselves to be a sovereign nation, the Confederate States of America, and adopted a constitution. The Upper South and border states, Delaware, Maryland, blah, 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 initially rejected the secessionist appeal. President Buchanan, President-elect Lincoln refused to recognize the Confederacy, declaring secession illegal. The Confederacy selected Jefferson Davis as his provisional president. Attempts at compromise followed, but Lincoln and Republicans rejected the proposed, critiquing compromise as contrary to the party's platform, free soil. Unsuccessful proposal to permanently enshrine slavery in the United States Constitution, thereby making it unconstitutional for future Congresses to end slavery. They rejected that. Lincoln said, I will suffer death before I consent to any concession or compromise, which looks like buying the privilege to take possession of this government to which we have a constitutional right. Sorry, just trying to find relevant stuff. Okay, well, the Civil War broke out. Union's Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina. This that's the succession territory. Sent a request to provisions to Washington, and Lincoln's order to meet that request was seen by secessionists as an act of war. Confederate forces fired on Union troops at Fort Sumter and began the fight. So there it started, and then Lincoln attacked and the war happened, and yeah, basically Lincoln wins the war with General Grant defeating Lee. Okay, and it's going, and then at some point he declares the Emancipation Proclamation in the middle of the war. Lincoln rejected major. June 18th, Congress passed an act banning slavery on all federal territory, which Lincoln signed in July. The Confiscation Act 1862 was enacted, providing court procedures to free the slaves of those convicted of adding rebellion. Let's see. My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and it is not either to save or to destroy slavery. This is important. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could do it, and if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps to save the Union, and that I forbear. I forbear because I do not believe it would help to save the Union. I have here stated my purpose according to my view of official duty, and I intend no modification of my oft-expressed personal wish that all men everywhere could be free. So what he's saying is that he's taking, I mean, it's obvious, but just paraphrasing, that his duty as president of the United States, his main objective is to preserve the Union, even though he does wish to free the slaves. That's secondary. So his main objective is to preserve the Union and to not let it be divided into that was his point in there. But that he is pro-freedom, anti-slavery. He issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, which announced that in states still in rebellion, the slaves would be freed. He kept his word and issued the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing the slaves in 10 states and not then under Union control, with the exemption specified for areas under such control. Lincoln's comment: I never in my life felt more certain that I was doing right than I do in signing this paper. So any slaves that could escape the rebellion control and get into a free state were then free. Union armies advancing south liberated all 3 million slaves in the Confederacy. All right, Gettysburg Address, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He defined the war as dedicated to the principle of liberty and equality for all. He declared that the deaths of so many brave soldiers would not be in vain, that slavery would end, and the future of democracy would be assured. The government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth, defying his prediction that the world will little note, nor long remember what we say here. The address became the most quoted speech in American history. All right. He promoted General Grant for doing a great job to the rank of Lieutenant General, a rank which had been unoccupied since George Washington. Re-election. I guess he was re-elected. And reconstructed the Union after Lee surrendered, generally. There were issues with Native Americans. I'm kind of going to skip over that just for time. Assassination. Obviously, he was assassinated. We know that. Religious beliefs. He was a religious skeptic, but he did include the Bible in many of his speeches, passages from the Bible, and he talked about God a lot. And it seems like he was, had a good relationship with God. He says, I claim not to have controlled events, but confess plainly that events have controlled me. Now at the end of the 3 years struggle, the nation's condition is not what either party or any man devised or expected. God alone can claim it. Whether it is tending seems plain. Whither it is tending seems plain. If God now wills the removal of a great wrong, and wills also that we of the North, as well as you of the South, shall pay fairly for our complicity in that wrong, impartial history will find therein new cause to attest in reverse, the justice and goodness of God. Seems awfully complicated, but I mean, it definitely doesn't. He's a huge intellect, and spiritual connection, and his health was not good. He took blue mass pills, which contained mercury to treat constipation. I mean, the ignorance of the medicine back then is crazy. Of course, there probably was good herbal medicine, but also ridiculous, things like ingesting mercury, which is extremely toxic. His health was not good. In any case, let's go to the astrology. Okay. Aquarius ascendant conjunct the sun. This is very powerful, very iconic. A sun conjunct ascendant. These people are very strong. They really attract a lot of things to themselves, especially whatever house the sun's ruling. Sun is ruling the 7th house, so attracting people to him, attracting partners, attracting business, attracting people flock to him because the 7th house is coming to him, right? Sun is in detriment in Aquarius, but I find Sun in Aquarius fine. Like, they're quirky, they're a bit nutty, they're crazy, but they're very intelligent. And maybe I'm a little biased because I'm also an air sign, Sun in Gemini, but I find Aquarius, and sometimes they do go off the deep end at extremes, but I find Sun in Aquarius to be pretty solid, especially intellectually. Great minds, brilliant, radical, rebellious, original, visionary, society thinker. They think about the big picture of society. They love their friends. They love their communities, and they love to be unique. They really embody obviously the Aquarian spirit, especially with this. And this is a natural leader, very powerful. I included Pallas Athena, which is a minor asteroid here, but it is a great strategist. Pallas Athena, great war strategist, great thinker, great with understanding patterns. Where Pallas Athena gives Perseus the shield of reflection and strategy when he's when he goes to fight Medusa, along with the sword of discrimination that Hermes gives Perseus. So these two together, it tends to have that mercurial counterpart, Pallas Athena. So I thought that was interesting, especially as he was leading the war effort as president. So strategic defensiveness, that's what, and yeah, pattern recognition as well. Strong intellectual asteroid, especially in Aquarius, conjunct the sun and ascendant, very strong. Right. So yeah, so 7th Lord in the 1st, attracting lots of people to him, very iconic, and just general strength, because it's the sun is angular here, so it's very strong. In any case, Moon is in Capricorn, so Moon is in detriment, opposite its rulership in Cancer. 12th house cusp. So, I mean, that's not as good, but the good part about Moon in Capricorn is that it does embody Capricornian values, which is responsibility, leadership, self-control. Capricorn moons can be very cold, distant, unemotional, unexpressive. They really don't know how to be personal. These people do not understand, like good personal relationships. They act by responsibility. They keep their personal relationships, going because of responsibility. But if it were up to their, judgment, or preference, without having any sort of, responsible understanding of their responsible duty, they would just not have any relations at all. They would just be completely alone, except for like maybe their husband or wife or whatever. It would be very sparse. their family would barely see them. Their friends would be, it would just be very cold and hard. And they would all be about like, work and achievement and success and all that. But because they know that other people are not like them, that they have to spend time with their family in order to keep their family, otherwise their family will disown them, or friends or whoever, they do it out of duty. And it's like, okay, it's time to spend time with my family on schedule, they put it on the calendar, see family, see friends, like that sort of thing. I mean, obviously there can be other mitigating factors, but in general, Capricorn moons tend to be quite cold and hard, but responsible and dutiful. Moon in the 12th house also is tends to be quite isolationist. They tend to need alone time in order to get in touch with themselves. I mean, Moon in Capricorn in the 12th house probably never really understands their own internal nature, because Moon in the 12th house already is a little bit difficult to access because there it's in the subconscious. And then doubly so with Moon in Capricorn. So this is like somebody who really doesn't even know what they feel like. They're just like kind of a stranger to their own emotions and to their own feelings. And so they're acting by very, very heady, very intellectual. Right. Moon is ruling the 5th and 6th quadrant, although it's 6th whole sign house. So foreign conflicts, right? And you could also see like the division of the union in here as well, because the South now is becoming a foreigner, and it's bringing conflict with it. So he's in conflict with the Southern slave states. 5th house also relates to children. 3 of his children died. Although he loved his children and he was very fond of his children. That's probably more from this Pisces planets, which I'll get to, but still, nonetheless. Yeah, so 5th house also rules fun and games and romance and things like that. So he was not a fun type of person. He did not know how to have fun. He was all work and studies and hardworking, responsible, very dutiful, very intellectual, but not fun, right? He did not know how to have fun, and he did not know how to get in touch with his emotions. His own subconscious was a source of conflict for him, because Moon in Capricorn in the 6th house, and in ways that he was probably not aware of, right? So depression and mental, just a whole host of things in the back of his mind that he just, not only that, Moon is square Mars. And so that's quite difficult, right? And we know he was assassinated. So that's going to be one of the factors there, but let's get to that later. Let's see, Ascendant Lord Saturn. Saturn is dispositing the sun, the ascendant, and the moon, because it's the co-ruler of Aquarius. Saturn is conjunct Neptune very high in the sky, conjunct the MC. So he himself is very prominent, very high, right? If the ascendant lord is going to the top, going to the, we call it culminating, conjunct the MC, or if it's square, the ascendant, which would be 22 degrees Scorpio. So it's right in that zone between the MC and the square to the ascendant. So very high, along with Neptune. Now, Neptune here with Saturn is going to create very strong idealism, especially in Sagittarius, which is already high-minded, idealistic, right? Saturn crystallizes anything that it touches. Not so much any other aspect, but when it's conjunct, it very much constricts and crystallizes and makes hard, firm, right? So that can be good or bad, depending on what planets we're talking about, what signs and where it's placed. But here, Neptune, because Neptune's imagination, spirituality, very expansive minds and beliefs. Here it's crystallizing it So it's creating a certain kind of idealism, especially in Sagittarius. So we could say that he's very idealistic, very high-minded, something like he's very fervent, like this ideology, like the taking his job as president, so seriously, right? Because there's the Saturn, he's Saturnian ruled, he's extremely Saturnian. And Saturn is so prominent, conjunct the MC, so his career, his public image, he's a natural authority because this is his ascendant lord, and Saturn conjunct the MC in Sagittarius. So Sagittarius also deals with law, so lawyering is prominent here. And yeah, so the idealism, like when he's president, he's like, no matter what, like I even says he'd rather die. I forget the whole quote, but I'd rather die than blah, 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 something. That's this very, very serious idealism, right? Very proper and responsible, and taking his leadership like so seriously. Like he'd rather die than fail than have his ideals be compromised. So yeah. Neptune here, Neptune on its own is not so good at conjunct the MC for somebody who's like a president, because Neptune is lies, deception, imagination, but Saturn really restricts that, really hardens that. So it's becoming much more idealistic. It's making that big imagination and condensing it, like freezing it, crystallizing it. It's disposited by Jupiter in domicile. And Jupiter here, I don't know if you can see the essential dignities. Jupiter is the strongest planet. So that's pretty cool. Like, Sun, Ascendant, and Moon, all disposited by Saturn. Saturn's disposited by Jupiter. Jupiter's in domicile in the first house, but basically conjunct the second house cusp. It's also conjunct Pluto and Mercury. So second house deals with finances. So he could become very wealthy, which I guess you could say, resources, like, so being president, having resources, tons of resources at his disposal. I guess you could say that, like a whole army, right? Leading a whole nation. Certainly that's, quite strong, wealthy, healthy resources there. Jupiter in Pisces also will signify his relationship to God, to spirituality. And I think he did have that. He was not very religious, but his relationship to God and spirituality, that's very healthy. We could see that, and that's prominent here. Now, Pluto is going to make it a bit heavier, darker. It is 9 degrees, so it's not like super close, but Pluto is heavily affecting his Mercury, and this Mercury is it's debilitated and in detriment, Mercury in Pisces, which is interesting because he was an avid learner, like he was highly studious. But I wonder, probably it's because when a weak planet is conjunct a very strong planet, the stronger planet kind of leads the way, takes over, right? So I think Jupiter and Pisces here really leads the way with this Mercury. And this Pluto also is being, well, it's darkening his beliefs. So this is another source of depression, because Jupiter often fuels our positivity, our faith in life, and our exuberance and our generosity and our connection to the universe and all that. Pluto is going to make it heavier. Pluto is going to bring in, at least periodically, depression, right? When his sons died, or other things, he can go through some serious depression, but he's going to bounce out of it because Jupiter is very strong here. Pluto is also going to give him deep psychological awareness, ability to really understand the motives of other people. But it's still ruled by Jupiter here. Jupiter in the second house also for resources and for mental resources, for knowledge, for really having an excellent capacity for study and retaining the mental resources, like reading books and just being a wealth of knowledge. That's what the second house is really excellent for. And speeches as well, because second house is voice. So speaking, I mean, obviously you could say that this is in the first house, so it's having that influence as well. First house Mercury is very witty. And it was stated that he initially gained popularity through being a raconteur, which raconteur I had to look up, even though I know it's a band, which I used to like. Jack White sings in it. They're a good band, even though Jack White's politics are ridiculously stupid and naive. That's besides the point. A raconteur is the best example is Mark Twain, somebody who's very educated and literate, but also humorous. And so it's an old term, but that's what it means. Somebody who's like combines wit and humor and education, and so Mercury in the first house is very witty, right? And Mercury definitely has good sense of humor. So that's part of it. He's very witty, and Mercury does gain dignity in the first house, even though it's not in good dignity in Pisces. So this combination, good and bad. Mercury is ruling the fourth house, so his early childhood, growing up in poverty, mother dying young. Mercury conjunct Pluto. Pluto can represent domination, abuse, power, control, authority. Not authority that's abusive, abusive control. Like, Saturn is authority, but Pluto is abusive authority, right? People who abuse you, who control you, who dominate you, right? So his early childhood was, definitely challenged, but there were some, is benefited by Jupiter in Pisces. So his knowledge, reading, studying, connection to God, those were all strong. Jupiter is ruling the second house, and the 10th house is MC, his career, right? And dispositing the ascendant Lord, which is very high, very prominent. Okay. Right. And I think I already mentioned, but I want to say it again. When ascendant Lord is very high, then that person likes to rise in society. They want to become top achiever above everyone else. Right. Almost like they need to, and even that they're destined to. It's not like an ego thing, although ego can be a part of it, but it's not necessarily an ego thing. So Venus here is clearly in the second house, and that also is good for money, although it's not good dignity. Venus is ruling the third cusp. Third and the second definitely gives good speaking, public speaking ability. Venus is also ruling, it's not ruling a cusp here, but this is the 9th whole sign house. 8th quadrant, 9th whole sign house. So bringing in 8th and 9th qualities into the second house. So speeches that are very high-minded, because 9th house, religious, philosophical, and high studies, right? So lawyer, and just very high intellect as well. And then Mars, there's a mutual reception here between Venus and Mars, not by degree, but by sign, because they're in each other's sign. And they're both in port dignity, but the mutual reception strengthens both of them. Mars is in Libra, which Mars in Libra can be very passive aggressive, depending, can either be very aggressive or very passive or somewhere in between. He was a good wrestler, so there's that, and I think that is in part because Venus is in Aries. Let's see, Mars is technically in the 8th quadrant, but in the 9th whole sign house and approaching the 9th cusp. So bring in 8th and 9th house elements. It's ruling the 9th house and the 3rd whole sign house, not ruling a cusp here, but most of the 2nd house. So 8th, 9th, 2nd, 3rd house are trading energy. So that's quite interesting, especially considering that he was a excellent speaker, public speaker, and lawyer, and yeah, Venus. Let's see, 3rd house, intellect, siblings, South Node, 8th. Definitely, yeah, he was bringing in 8th house elements as well. Although Mercury, and well, Mercury again, so Mercury is ruling the 8th cusp. Yeah, that's combined conjunct Pluto. So there we go. That's a very strong, debilitated in detriment. Mercury ruling the 8th house conjunct Pluto. That is a sign of, I would say, in the 1st house, I would say that's a very strong sign of death. Mercury is sesquisquare Mars, and Mars in detriment. Really difficult there too. Really bad. But he has a lot of good things too, like these trines here. Uranus, I didn't even get to Uranus, I'll get to that. Uranus is trine Mercury, and that's brilliant. That's truly brilliant, especially when you consider Uranus is exalted in Scorpio and stationary and conjunct the North Node. Now, this Uranus is extremely strong. And Uranus, remember, Uranus is the great awakener. Uranus gives the most awareness out of any planet of society, of the big picture. If Jupiter is the 30,000-foot view, Uranus is the outer space view. Sort of like this here. You know, and it's not too dissimilar to my own. I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I've exalted Uranus and North Node conjunct a little farther apart, but still in the 1st house. I believe that, well, in any case, astrology would definitely be up his alley if he so chose to go down that route, but he didn't. Funny enough, interestingly enough, Uranus is also very strongly associated with politics because of that huge view, thinking about the whole world, thinking about the whole society, right? Especially when it's in good dignity, when it's heavily, you know, good aspect, good position, right? Here it's in the 9th whole sign house, or ninth quadrant, but it's actually the 10th whole sign house. So it's very prominent, very high in the sky, stationary, which means that it is so potent, and he's so aware. You're just aware of everything. He even aware, like I knew there were some quotes about like him having to deal with the Rothschild influence from Europe, trying to, you know, gain their hold on the American financial system. He had to deal with that as well, and he knew well. He was well, you know, understanding, because Uranus and Scorpio, the Scorpio gives the depth, Uranus gives the breadth. So this is a very, very aware combination. Like he's really understanding the psychological influences, the underlying conspiracies, the secret dealings going on, the big picture, all of it, especially as he got older, right? And 9th house deals with law, philosophy, obviously religion, you know, like high-level studies, graduate school, things like that. With Uranus here, it's definitely going into big picture, you know, society, politics, all that. Right? Two people who I can think of who have North Node conjunct Uranus, Barack Obama and your favorite president, Trump. I say that with a sense of humor because some people hate him and some people love him, obviously. But Trump also has Sun and Uranus together in Gemini and North Node. But yeah, very powerful combination. And myself too, I'm very concerned with politics. I always have been. And I'd love to be a politician. I don't think I would be a good one because I have my sun in the 8th house, which tends to ruin reputation. And it's very hard to see when the sun's in the 8th house. Like it's not good visibility. Whereas like sun conjunct the ascendant, excellent visibilities. Sun conjunct the MC, like Trump, excellent visibility, right? Sun in the 8th house, no, terrible. That's one of the worst positions for recognition, the 8th house, even though there's a lot of power and control. So I could be like a political advisor, right? If somebody wanted to hire me, hint, hint, want to hire me? No, probably not. In any case, excellent Uranus. His awareness is unparalleled. He really is aware of a lot of things, especially as he gets older with this North Node being activated. As he's younger, in his first half of life, very studious because 3rd house, right? So the intellect, and Venus is in the 2nd house. So knowledge, intellect, all that, right? As he gets older, then he's much more in the public eye, and higher studies, more faith, more religion, more philosophy, and activating this Mars. Well, they're activated both times, because this is activating Venus, which is activating Aries, which is activating Mars, and they're switching energies anyway. So they're activated both times. And that's helping it, that they're in each other's signs. Mars, let's see. Yeah, not a great 8th house because of the Mercury and then the Mars in detriment here. Although, it's not fully in the 8th house, moving into the 9th house, but definitely accidental issues. Mind you, also, Uranus in Scorpio, especially conjunct North Node, is definitely accidental and can mean sudden death, which is why I have predicted for myself that if I do die, it'll be very suddenly and accidental. So just throwing that in there. And he did die suddenly and accidentally. It wasn't an accident for the person who shot him, but it definitely has that quality of Uranian sort of dead. Not long and drawn out, that's for sure. Uranus is trine the Mercury, and that helps a lot because Uranus in good aspect to Mercury is brilliant. And Mercury in Pisces can have its own sort of brilliance. It takes a little longer for it to achieve that, but they have to work hard, but it can work well. It can. It's just a little more difficult. Conjunct the Pluto here and Jupiter, I think he had certain kind of intuition or spiritual guidance, because Pisces is so spiritual, and then Mercury and Pisces can hear voices. Often this is a psychic combination, and Pluto and Pisces, conjunct Pluto and Pisces. Pluto's also spiritual and psychic potentially, right? So here he's getting messages from the other world. Like, he might not have known what to do with them or how to talk about it, but he probably was, guided from beyond. So that's very strong. That's very prominent. Venus, semi-square, ascendant and sun. I mean, that's going to be challenging. Certain excesses, he would be prone to certain kind of excesses. I don't know. Like, I don't know the details of what that means, but some kind of food or drink or something, and maybe those blue pills that were Mercury, that consumption, because 2nd house deals with mouth, with words and food as well. So there's definitely something disharmonious going on here, especially because Venus is in poor dignity here. But Venus is trine Neptune, and that is excellent for imagination and creativity. So yeah, I'm not sure how that relates, actually, to be honest, with because he was not a creative type. But I know, I mean, his speech writing, his speaking ability, definitely adding, a lot of creative flair, a lot of aesthetic qualities, especially because this is becoming very crystallized by Saturn. Saturn's making it much more intellectual, so bring in a strong intellectual quality as well. Yeah, for speaking, very eloquent, I would say, and highly, like kind of a, high intellectual creativity. No. Chiron is square Uranus, and that again, that's first whole sign house, but 12th quadrant. So, his subconscious, his depression, his there were things that he was unaware of that were really bothering him, of course, I'm sure. That made it more challenging for him. Chiron conjunct Uranus seems very painful. I'm sorry, Chiron square Uranus. A lot of modern people have the opposition, as I do as well. So something similar here. And wounds, rejection, and this could contribute as well to the attack on him, because Chiron is still influencing the ascendant in the first house. So square Mars, square Moon, Uranus square Chiron, and Mercury conjunct Pluto, ruling the 8th house. Moon's ruling the 6th house of his health. There's not really any bad aspects to Saturn, which is his ascendant lord, so that's good. But 6th lord and 8th lord are problematic, and Moon in general. Moon, I think, definitely has a relationship to the body as well. So I left this white moon Lilith here because it was in such a prominent position, conjunct the descendant, opposite the sun. And white moon Lilith definitely has like a good quality to it, very beneficial. And I don't have that much experience with it in charts. I look at it, but it's not something that I know a whole lot. But it itself is stationary and angular and in the 7th house. And so I think this contributes to his goodly nature. I think overall he was goodly, like a good person. Like he wanted to free the slaves. I think that was evident throughout his whole life. Also evident by this Jupiter in Pisces, which shows a lot of compassion, empathy, high-mindedness, strong connection to God, right? He had a lot of poor dignity planets too, but his two really strong planets are Uranus in Scorpio, 9th house, conjunct North Node, and Jupiter in Pisces. And the Sun as well, because of the angularity, conjunct the ascendant. Yeah. So, yeah, white moon tends to be like, I don't know, I want to say like kind of like a saintly indicator. I don't want to take it like too heavily, too seriously, but it can indicate something good, pure, noble, just about the person, if it, depending on the sign. And, and Leo can be very loving and big-hearted, right? Let's see what else. I think I touched on everything. Uranus also is the co-ruler of Aquarius. I mean, I take Saturn to be the main ruler, but I take the outer planet rulers to be like almost like a spiritual, having like a spirit, kind of like a secondary ruler that is more in spirit, right? So that is very strong for especially because Sun and ascendant are Aquarius. Both the Uranus and Saturn are very high in the sky, so prominent, so high achieving, very, leadership, public arena, public eye, higher education, philosophy, religion, that sort of thing. All right, let's just take a quick look at his draconic chart, see if there's anything majorly we can look to here. Mars is in Pisces, conjunct in between Pluto and Jupiter. This I feel like is a little bit ominous because of the aggressive quality of Mars and Pluto together. And it can usually indicate both like deadly will, like somebody who's willing to die for their cause, because just like the force that Mars and Pluto together combine make, but also some violence. You know, it's like that intense desire when Mars and Pluto are unified. And also the Pisces is very can be very idealistic, imaginative. So this is something like combining like spirituality, imagination, ideals with this deadly will, this deadly, like, you know, fight to the death for the ideals, for the Piscean compassion, empathy, imagination, you know, the higher mind, that sort of thing. Uranus and Saturn are Aries in the second house. Saturn's much farther, but let's see, Uranus to Venus. So this is relating to, again, second house. So speech and consumption as well, knowledge, awareness. So, you know, those things are all appropriate for him. A lot going on here, 5th and 6th house. So, you know, sports, conflict, you know, wrestling, obviously, but there's no conjunctions here. So, I mean, love of children. He had a great love of children despite his Capricorn moon in the 12th house. So perhaps we can see that here. Like, he brought them to work with him. He was very fond of his children, and even to the annoyance of his coworkers. You know, they were very annoyed by his children coming to work with him, but he loved them. He wanted them there. So that perhaps we could see here, right? Because I don't really see it with this moon in Capricorn in the 12th house. But Sun, Ascendant, Chiron, in the 5th house in Cancer, motherly, caring, nurturing, right? As well, this indicates between the 5th and 6th his great sports ability and ability to be very competitive and wanting to serve. You know, 6th house, the war, the conflict, Mercury, Pluto, and Jupiter and Leo. That seems appropriate here. Venus and Virgo and the stuff. That's not really, I mean, it's not really conjunct anything. It's a one-off. Yeah, nothing much really stands out here. I guess this white moon Lilith is pretty close to natal moon, so maybe that helps him be more goodly in nature. In any case, that's Abraham Lincoln, and I don't want to, you know, continue on any longer, make this video any longer. I like to try and keep them as brief as possible, even though they get quite long sometimes. All right, guys, that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please press the like button and subscribe to my channel if you have not already. Leave a comment down below about anything, any requests or comments, concerns, whatever. And book a reading with me. My website is macroastrology.com. My email is macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com. And I will see you again soon. All right, thanks, bye.